Hello and welcome to Road to Redline. Tonight we're joined by Rob Colborne, who is a performance driving consultant, which in layman's terms helps people go faster and go safer, both on the road and on the track. He also spends some time instructing at the Porsche Experience Centre, which gives you an idea of his experience and the depth and knowledge that he has to make our favourite machines go that little bit further. We've also got Lee Sibley on, as always.
Hello.
And unfortunately, Andy's been coronaed, so he's not with us tonight, but hopefully he'll be dialing in on the next podcast. So we look forward to speaking to Andy soon.
Mr. Rob Colborne, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Excellent. Yes, very well, thank you, matey. Should point out to the guys and girls listening at home that your title is a performance driving consultant, is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Most people would think of it as driving instructor, but then you think of learners. So
yes, exactly. Well, look, what does your job entail then, Rob? Top end.
Ultimately, the main aim is just to help people get more enjoyment from their driving. Typically, I meet drivers of some really, really nice cars. Anything north of 60, 70, £100,000. So clearly there's an enthusiasm for driving if you're spending that kind of money on your vehicle. But it's not exclusive to that. I certainly don't own anything of that value, and I really love driving. So that's the main aim for me, is to help people enjoy their driving more, and therefore they'll just become more competent at it, safer, and all those other good society sort of requirements of us when we're on the road.
Is that on road or track or both?
Both, really. I've got a road background predominantly, so I probably I do work more on the road. And obviously, even the most hardened track day enthusiasts still spend more time of their driving lives on the road. So if you can marry up how a car behaves on the road and track, obviously there are going to be differences in the choices of our behaviours, but in terms of vehicle dynamics, things like that, how your inputs affect the vehicle, there's a lot to be discussed that carries over from one to the other. So a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, there are things, like you say, that transfer from one to the other. I'm lucky enough, you and I have spent a bit of time together, haven't we, in the car at the wheel. And one of the gems I picked up from you in terms of advice was you've got to look at your driving skill set as like a toolbox. So you only use certain tools for certain tasks, don't you? And obviously that changes depending on whether you're on road or track. But there is an overlap, isn't there, just in terms of like awareness and management of the car, isn't there?
Completely. I mean, the example I always use for clients is to quote Jackie Stewart, and how he says that racing drivers and chauffeurs are all employing smoothness; they're just expressing it differently. And it's a really good way, particularly if you've got someone who's quite track enthusiastic and you're out on the road with them, is to try and keep that discipline. And to not be reckless, because modern cars are so competent now that you've got to think about what's around the next corner, because your car will likely carry you around it at a pace where you'll encounter a problem if you're not ready for it. So so actually, and everyone can anticipate, even if you've not been chauffeur driven, you can imagine what a chauffeur driving style feels like. So smoothness is the aim of the game, really. That's the big carryover.
Okay, well, look, on the subject of smoothness, I've got a question for you, because the 911 is known, if you like, to have tricky handling, with the engine being in the wrong place, etc., etc. Yeah. I think if you look at the 911 versus Cayman argument, which is a perpetual argument that's going on within this podcast, the Cayman allegedly is easier because to drive because it's mid-engine, but I actually believe the 911 is easier to drive because it offers you more feedback. Would you agree with that or not, as a performance driving consultant?
I mean, they're both incredibly good cars to feel what is going on. I mean, you get in anything built by Porsche, and the steering and the brake feel is typically very rewarding. You can get a lot of feel. Certainly when it starts to, I mean, obviously not talking about the road stuff here, but when you start to reach the point where the car was moving around a little bit, there is potentially more risk with a mid-engine car that once it breaks away, it can snap a little bit more.
That's the point,
sharply.
Isn't it? Yeah, and it's too late by that point to rescue it.
It can be. So the 911 with the engine a little bit further back, you know that's likely to have the effect that it will have. So, I mean, maybe people are just a bit more ready for it because they've got this reputation, this car. I mean, what's the statistic they say? 70% of all Porsches built are still on the road, and I'd find it quite interesting to see what percentage of the 30% have deteriorated on their own or have been put into the ditch. Probably more the latter, one would imagine. And it is very easy to blame the car, that when you've made the mistake and you've upset the balance of the car. Right, yeah, well, that's because the engine's in the back. Might have not happened 10 mile an hour slower.
It's never our fault, is it?
No, absolutely. It's quite an interesting debate, but certainly, I mean, they're very, very different cars. The Cayman's very much got a sort of go-karty feel to it. It feels a bit lighter. I mean, obviously they're slightly lighter, but not so much that it's particularly relevant. But the coming together of all those sort of configuration elements, mid-engine, all that sort of thing, does make it feel lighter and more pointy. And that's the whole point about mid-engine, that they rotate quickly into corners, but by definition, if a car rotates quickly, then it must over-rotate quite quickly as well. So if I'm wanting to showboat a little bit at work, if I'm sliding a car through a corner, in some ways it's easier in a 911 because you can make the car do that because you just pitch the weight where you want it to go. And mid-engine cars are more likely to sort of hang on a bit longer, and the point between losing grip and not being recoverable, it's a slightly narrower window, is how I think of it. So but there's pros and cons about either, and I wouldn't turn any of them out of my garage, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. We're going to cross out the next question then. Like, old versus new Porsche then, so obviously not just the 911s here. How different are they really to drive? I know the new stuff has got all the tech on it that's kind of makes it stay pointing in the right direction, but turn all of that off. Obviously the 991s, their wheelbase grew by 100 millimeters, as an example, but they are faster and whatnot. What's harder to drive?
I think, obviously not everyone assumes, we've done it just there in the question a little bit, that it's all about the tech, stability programs, and all that sort of stuff. But actually, those things, I tend to think of stability programs as a bit of a grip overdraft. They don't do anything until you start to exceed the mechanical grip. And the mechanical grip has improved as they go along. So by definition, the modern stuff just gets easier and easier and easier to drive. Interestingly enough, just this morning, a friend of mine put a clip up on Facebook of the GT1. And they were 600 horsepower, and their 0 to 60 was 3.7. And I made the point, it's interesting that standard, 911S is or 4S is looking at around 3.7 now. Yet that sort of car, the manageability of it, is a completely different beast. You look at now the Turbo S with around 600 horsepower, and you can just drive it to the shops with no drama at all. Stick 600 horsepower in an era of a car 20 years ago, and that's lethal. And it's not just about the technology that saves you once you exceed the grip limit, it's about the width of the tires and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the point you make about the 991, the Porsche Experience Centre opened in 2008, and they launched the venue simultaneously with an event launch for the Gen 2 997, which obviously is 100 mil shorter on the wheelbase. And there's a particular long sort of right-hand bend at the Experience Centre where at speeds in a 991, you just go around quite comfortably. I mean, you're doing sort of 65, 70 mile an hour. a guy fairly recently, a year or so ago, bought his 997. I took it round at the same speeds we were doing in 991s, and the back started to get a bit light.
Yeah, I know exactly the corner you're on about there. It's at at the back, isn't it, near the skid pan, and it's slightly off. Oh, okay.
not the off camber one.
Oh, okay.
You don't want to be going around there at 60. If you go around there at 65 mile an hour, you'll be on the grass.
Yeah.
So when you come out, if so, as you know it, and anyone listening that knows it, as you enter from the car park onto the handling circuit, there's that first right hander that drops down into a left.
Yes.
So when you come around that on a lap and you turn that into one corner,
you
take that round at 65, 70 and anything 991 onwards, and it's just calm. I mean, don't get me wrong, the 997 will get you around there quick enough that you'll never make the left if you really ask it to.
Yeah.
But it was just the point that naturally the car just starts to rotate a little bit more, where it's just that little bit shorter, and that increase of wheelbase gives that extra stability. Of course, the 992 has got a wider front track as well, which sort of adds to it. So, I mean, that was the point watching this video of the GT1. 500-600 horsepower stuff is getting fairly commonplace in the world now, yet they're easy to drive. Any idiot can buy one, as long as they got the money. But you couldn't necessarily, I'd be very, very careful driving something like a GT1, because it's just ready to bite you. Not that I've driven one, but you can just see the sort of car that it is. So yeah, it's quite interesting how modern cars are getting easier and easier to drive, and just whacking on. I mean, you look at the GT2 RS, 700 horsepower. I mean, it's bonkers. I mean, it's fantastic, sounds amazing, looks amazing, drives brilliantly, and all that sort of thing. But for a road car, 400 horsepower is plenty, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely overkill for a road car. So, I mean, despite the fact that you're saying cars are getting easier to drive, but I would actually say, and again, I've benefited for some seat time in the car with you. People, if they want to go faster at the track, they'll either upgrade the car in terms of get a new one, or they'll modify it. But I just think that surely before you do any of that, if you want to get faster or at least improve your time, you've got to improve yourself and invest in yourself rather than the car.
Yeah, I'd completely agree. I mean, that's where my own driving story, my driving competence has grown immeasurably. I mean, I've been teaching now for 20 years, and I'm vastly improved over who I was just 3 or 5 years ago, because of things I've learned, practice I've had, mainly guidance from other people, or I've learned things that I've learned over the previous 15 years that have now become consolidated because I've reached a certain point of understanding in certain things. I mean, you can give me the world's best tennis racket, and Roger Federer is still going to annihilate me on the court, isn't he? Mm-hmm. Because it's not just about the equipment. There's a great story actually with this about a friend of mine, Brian Saunders, who's a race coach, and he was on a track day with a client in something like a BMW M4, and another guy in an identical car came over in the pit lane after a few laps and asked this driver, what have you done to your car? You're absolutely flying past me. What mods have you done? And this guy chuckled. He said, "Oh, none." And he pointed to his left where Brian was sitting. He said, "You need to get yourself one of these." And he said that the car was completely standard, but of course the advice and the coaching that he was getting, and the confidence that it brings. I mean, that's quite often, as much as any actual advice that you get, having someone in the car that okay, this person does this for a living, so when they say, "Yeah, no, you're okay, keep going at this pace," well, they're in the car, they don't want to fall off with you, so you get a feeling of trust, so you can end up pushing your own comfort levels a bit, knowing that, well, it's if he's not worried, I'm not worried. If I start to worry in the passenger seat, you probably want to slow down a little bit. It may be that someone quicker than me won't be worried, but I know a lot of really good race instructors that have had moments where they're 180 mile an hour in the passenger seat on the Nürburgring thinking, why exactly am I doing this again? Because they're starting to feel uncomfortable. It may be that Mark Webber would be quite comfortable, so it's all a question of how far up you've gone in your experience and your knowledge. And as you say, coaching is the only real way to develop yourself.
Well, this is it, and it's not just in terms of times. I think time, if you're doing track days or whatever, or have like competitive aspirations, yes, time's important, but actually it's improving technique. And if you improve on your technique, then pace comes with it, doesn't it, as a byproduct, really?
Absolutely. I mean, the time is merely the measure to see whether the improvement in your technique has actually taken root and had the effect that you want, if you're using that measure. This is where the difference, or a difference between road and track comes, is that we're not really measuring time on the road at all, apart from, are you hungry and do you want to stop for lunch yet? But time is irrelevant, and the carryover for the two would be that you're actually looking at, well, what have I done, and what effect has that had on the car, or the situation, and could I have done something differently to get a different response, one that would be preferable, by whatever measure you're having. So typically, as we said earlier, smoother. If you can do something that is smoother, then when you are in a track environment and quicker is part of the pursuit, then smoother is probably going to help you become quicker. So yeah, analysis is the big thing. I mean, a classic question that I ask customers that I relate to, I'll ask you now. You can tie your shoes, presumably?
I can, yes.
Can you tell me how you do it?
Yes, loop, swoop and pull.
Yeah, well, if you were to actually break it down, there's a lot more steps to it than that. You've not talked about how you take each lace in each hand for a start.
Okay, yeah.
You know, if you start to break it down, I had that broken down to me as an example of teach me how to make a cup of tea, and you've got to go through every step. How to identify a kettle, blah 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 blah. You know, and that's really the idea of coaching, is having someone look at what you do every day.
Yeah.
Go, okay, I see you do that. Have you tried this? Or why do you do that? What effect does that have? And sometimes it's just that second opinion gets you looking at it from a different angle.
Yes, yeah, and well, as we know, you can never have too much tuition. Anything in life, isn't it? It doesn't just go for driving; it's quite literally anything. So, as I say,
Absolutely.
I've benefit from it. I know Joe has as well in the Cayman on track with you. So, Rob, I want to dig a little bit into your story. That's the crux of this podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, surely, how many Brave pills do you take in the morning before you climb into a car with people, you know?
Well, this is interesting, actually, because as you can hear, I'm quite happy to talk about where my own limitations lie. And my background, I've found, is immensely helpful for nearly everybody that comes through. So you'll get the odd one like Jack that wants to be a racer that I just think, probably going to be a bit more than I can deliver at some point in the future. But most people, I don't really worry too much about most people, because, as you know, when I was 18 to 24, I was a white van delivery driver, and furthered the reputation. You know, not proud of it necessarily, but it does give me the ideal insight. So again, when you know, there is this natural assumption that we must all just be nervous of what that client is going to be like when we don't know them. Is he going to be over enthusiastic? And to be honest with you, the more overly enthusiastic they are, the more I enjoy it, because I focus on the enthusiasm, not the excess of it. Because when I first started and I met this guy, Bernard Aubrey, the original Porsche instructor, I've just been so lucky to have met him as a young guy. I've done a couple of tests to become an instructor, but quite frankly, I was now probably more dangerous because I'd got a couple of bits of paper to my name, hadn't I? And they say a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. So I've gone in and met this guy thinking, yeah, look at me. I know what I'm doing. I've passed that test. I've passed this test. Essentially, I had no real experience, and he channeled it. So I don't really need to be brave. I just need the guy that triggers that concern for most instructors. I just recognize that guy. Yeah, you're the old me. So if I just give you the guidance that I know worked for me, which again, it's the whole road safety thing. You know, when people wag their finger at me, go, oh, road safety. Yeah, I get it. I'm not an idiot. But how to be safe? That's the point. Not to be safe. That's pretty obvious. How to do it. So no, I don't take brave pills. The only thing I don't like with the client is if they don't listen, because then you can't help them. But find me someone who's gone through the process of emailing me, having a phone conversation. He's looked at the website first. He's then emailed me, or he's rung me up, and we've had a conversation. Now that guy's not the guy to worry about. So the people that I worry about are the people that won't get in touch with someone like me. You know, the 19-year-old that's cruising around in his Corsa, or whatever he's got, with his one hand on top of the wheel, making it all look quite difficult, yet he's only doing 43 mile an hour, albeit through a 20 zone. And it's that guy that's truly dangerous. You know, there is this assumption that the guy with his £100,000 sports car, who you see may be going a little bit quickly in terms of MPH, but as long as he's not going quickly in terms of the environment through which he's traveling, then he's not the worry for me. How many times have you been down the motorway and seen a Lamborghini doing 62 mile an hour? He's not interested. You know, you're going past and he's just not interested, because he's on his way to Silverstone or Thruxton or Brands Hatch, and he's gonna fill his boots there, isn't he? And sometimes when you've got that level of power, and you know, it's a bit like when corporate drivers that I sit with, they're trying to hustle. It's like, there's no point. You're not going to beat the clock. For you to beat the clock with anything like any significance, you've now got to be highly arrestable and highly dangerous all the time. You won't do it. So, if you're going to be a bit risky and a bit too quick, you're going to save 37 seconds over a couple of hours. Not really worth it. For you to save the 25 minutes because you left late, you've now got to be three figures all the way, and it's just not feasible. So yeah, I'm just not really that brave. Like I say, my background being a white van driver and then sitting with this guy, the morning I sat with Bernard Aubrey was...
Rob, just before you go into that, sorry, how did you get from that point where you're a delivery van driver, as you say, or a van? I don't actually know what you were doing in the van. I've said delivery, I don't know why, but...
No, that's exactly what I did.
Right, okay, fine. So that was an incredible guess, wasn't it? But so you're a van delivery driver. How do you go from that to sitting in a car with Bernard Aubrey saying, right, here we go, I'm, fairly handy behind the wheel here? How did that happen? Sort of luck, really. Financial requirement. So really enjoyed driving, got built a bit bored of the parcel bit, and had reached a point where to earn any more money, I'd have to buy my own van or try and set up a firm, and I wasn't interested in that, but I liked driving. So I started to just rack my brains as to what I would do, and then coincidentally saw an advert for BSM in the paper. Learn to be a driving instructor. Okay, yeah, I could do that. So looked into that. I still remember the course was £1,500. Started trying to save up for that. Now at 24, with a fairly healthy weekend binging habit, saving wasn't really coming along quickly. And after, I don't know, 2-3 months or something of having been talking about it, my mum said, you're really quite keen on this, aren't you? Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to do it. I just got to try and save the money up. And it's almost like it was fated that she then revealed, unknown to me, that she and my dad, since I was a kid, have been putting money away in a post office book. You boys are probably a bit too young to remember post office books. And the amount was £1,540.
Meant to be.
So just enough for the course and another weekend out. So went to BSM and just went through the studying. And then the girlfriend that I lived with at the time worked for a telecoms firm who had a 911 on lease that they used as a sales incentive. So whoever smashed their target that month by the greatest percentage got given this 911 to roll around in for a month. But on day one, you would be sent out with Bernard Aubrey because he was the original Porsche guy. Excuse me. Again, fated somewhat. She didn't actually win. She came second, but first place, thankfully, didn't have a driving license. So she got this car and got told that on day one she'd go and meet this guy. And my honest reaction was, what? You can do this in 911s? Get that guy's number. And so that was it. Her manager, through the same deal, then is eligible for these vouchers. You know, these car clubs where so many points you can hire whatever for whatever length of time.
Yes.
Well, he didn't want them, so we bought them off him, and I hired an old Ferrari 348 coupe for 3 days. And on the first day, I'd arranged to meet this guy. So I go up to London, pick up this old Ferrari in King's Cross, drive it down the Euston Road. Somewhat less confident than when I'd been in the vans down the Euston Road, because you're bullying everything out of the way then, aren't you? And went straight to the track at Longcross, the test track, and met him there. And I've got to be honest with you, my expectation was that I'd meet this guy, I'd have a half day, and I would drive home faster, quick around every corner, hair on fire at every opportunity, you know, absolutely the more performance orientated, the sort of things that you've sort of alluded to earlier in this conversation. And the reality was I drove home slower, more disciplined, more appropriate, and I enjoyed it more. And it was that last one that seemingly went against all the other ones that made me realise he's done something there. He's actually changed how I think about driving. But how did he do it? Well, it's taken me years to work out exactly how he's done it, because it was all quite subtle, because it was completely against my expectation. So again, back to that question of how many Brave pills do you take in the morning? You know, that guy would have needed a skinful of vodka to sit next to me in those days. But he just completely changed my view on it, by just throwing in a couple of questions, like the things like, describe how you tie your shoes. Do you think about the tire angle? And they're so blindingly obvious that it makes the person being asked the question just stop and go, oh my God, I should know that. That's so obvious. I really should be able to answer that. And I've never thought of that before. And that's why I think my background, yes, it will meet the odd limitation when you meet someone with racing ambitions, but for 99% of the people that get in touch, what are they? They're guys and girls that own a nice car that want to know how to drive it better. Well, hello, I'll know all the sorts of mistakes you're likely to make, because they're all the sorts of mistakes that I've made. Yeah. And I'll know the discomforts that you feel. I know what you're likely to do before you do it. You know, and everyone can be a little bit different, but it all comes down into a few sort of subcategories, if you like. So vision, steering, throttle, brakes, anticipation, these sort of general topics. Oh, right, well, no, they've got a bit of an issue with this, or they've got a bit of an issue with that. And quite frankly, that's what I mean, that after an hour of sitting with Bernard, I looked at him and I remember thinking to myself, man, I thought I liked driving. This guy takes enjoying driving to a completely new level. Interestingly, I mentioned him earlier, Gordon Robertson, the chief instructor at Porsche. He's been with Porsche since, 99, I guess, which is when I met Bernard. And that was when they were first setting up a team around him. And Gordy and I were just chatting just before Christmas, I think. And he told me that someone had once asked him, so who's the best road driver you've ever met? And he said, instantly, the answer was Bernard Aubrey. But I couldn't tell you why. And there is something about him that again, like, you know, you watch Federer, he clearly looks like the best tennis player, but unless you know tennis, you couldn't tell me why. And it's taken me, I've been doing it 20 years, and it was after 17. It's the last 3 years, pennies have been dropping left, right, and centre as to what made Bernard different.
How do you reckon you'd sum that up if someone asked you to sort of give that as the short version?
Simple.
So to speak?
Simple. You want to understand Bernard Aubrey? Understand Bruce Lee. So there's a book called Striking Thoughts. I'm not really sure it's by Bruce Lee, but it's all Bruce Lee's little quotes. If you remember the old, it's like a finger pointing at the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger, or you miss all the heavenly glory, all that sort of stuff. So Bruce Lee in martial arts would take absolutely any idea from any martial art. If it works, he'll take it. If it doesn't work, he doesn't take it. And then he added his own thought. That's one of the things in the book. And that's really what Bernard did, So you've got your rally guy saying that that's the best way to drive. You've got your circuit guy, you've got your police guy, all these different little disciplines, if you like, or take it even further still to every idea. Oh, well, when you're approaching a left-hand corner, you should do this, or you should do that. We should do this, we should do that. You know, everyone, and I'll do it myself. I'll give you little ideas. But this is the positive, negative thing. Every idea I've got, I will look to both reinforce it and undermine it, because at some point that idea won't work. It only takes a little difference in the circumstances. And that's really, really what makes him different. Everyone else, once you get an idea and you know it works 99 times out of 100, we tend to think that we always do that. Hang on a minute. What about the 1 in 100? You know, that actually, that's probably more important to know, because you don't use it very often. But when it crops up as a requirement, if you've forgotten all about it, you're now in trouble because you don't have that extra idea. And that's really how I'd sum it up. You know, that there is no idea that doesn't have merit. You know, if you and I go out on the road, am I likely to teach you to go up the pavement? Not really. But if there's a choice between that and a head on with a bus because the guy slumped across his steering wheel because he just had a heart attack, up the pavement we go, boys. You know, it's an extreme example, but this stuff does happen. You know, you remember the bridge that collapsed on the M20, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah.
You know, if I told you to drive down, just watch out for the bridges collapsing, boys. You'd think, geez, Rob, that's paranoid. Well, yeah, but it did happen. You know, I've never seen a horse leap over an overhead bridge and take its rider down onto the motorway, but I bet I met a bloke in Kent who has.
Yeah.
And you think, wow, that's extreme, and it's a 1 in a million. But well, look out for it then. So yeah, that would be how I describe, and that actually starts to give you infinite possibilities. That every scenario you look at, you know, I could do this, I could do that, and you just learn to become more creative. I mean, this idea of really freakish incidents. I was chatting to another instructor I know, a guy called Neil Ferber, really talented, really bright guy. Got a lot of time for Neil. And I was talking to him about these sort of freakish accidents, and he said, "Well, yeah, but they're so freakish. Surely, you know, you don't really want to waste time worrying about those." I'm like, well, I get why you say that. You know, the likelihood of it occurring, yeah, fair enough. But a white van not signalling on a roundabout and cutting me up is so everyday and so bread and butter that I should just be ready for that all the time. You know, it's a given. In fact, if I don't get cut up by that van, or dare I say it, that BMW driver who didn't indicate, you know, all of those stereotypes, they're stereotypes because they're common. So they shouldn't be the things tripping you up. If I could learn to be good enough to stop the bridge falling on top of my car, man, then you know you're getting talented. And that for me is where that continuing enthusiasm is coming from, is that there is no limit to how creative you can become in a way.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. Then you've taught me a couple of times, Rob, and it's funny actually what you said earlier about your experience with Bernard. It was exactly the same, like to the letter, on my experience with you. And
really?
Learn, yeah, like for road stuff that still keep with me today. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that you could still teach me or remind me of anyway. But and obviously, as Joe said earlier on, him and I did a track day at Silverstone with you for the day. And I mean, the stuff that we picked up, and by the end, we've mentioned on this podcast before, we were pedaling that little Cayman. Having so much fun, and
can we just say that again? What car are you in, Lee?
Yeah, it was a Cayman. But like I say, this little honest car, and we were absolutely flying. But just off a couple of things that you taught us, really. And when we got in the car, it wasn't you saying, "I'm going to make you go faster." You were just saying, right, well, let's improve your driving, and speed just comes with it, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'll tell you what, it was really childish that day, but I'll tell you what really got me towards the end of the afternoon. I don't know if you remember, Rob, but we went out, and obviously our little Cayman is, it's a basic, whether it's 2006, 2007. It's had a few bits and bobs done to it, but it's a sub 20 grand, piece of kit. And we by the end of the day, you had us flying past GT4s and GT3 RSs and guys that were there in much bigger, more impressive metal, and we were going past them, and they were confused. I think we were equally as confused, but it was quite impressive.
Yeah, well, again, sometimes when you've got 500 horsepower, the temptation to absolutely leather it out of that one corner and keep going and going and going, you end up just mildly frightening yourself at the next one, and you can end up taking a bit more pace off than you really need to. And, what's that phrase? All the gear, no idea. Just having the money for it doesn't necessarily give you the talent for it. And so again, we've sort of touched on this earlier. The guy that's got all the money and all the cars but never seeks out training, I don't want to sit with that guy particularly. Someone who's got a much lesser car but a desire to improve their driving, that's who I want. I mean, I was just talking to her earlier. I've got a female client. Okay, she's got a GT4, so it's a highly competent piece of kit. But if I were to line up any number of people, you even out of 3, you would never pick her as the GT4 owner. You just wouldn't. She's a retired former marketing agency owner from London, now lives down in Dorset somewhere. You would not put her in a GT4. And she's not especially fast. She's quite nervous of other people on the track. Her big aim is to go out on her own, so she only ever goes with an instructor. But she's brilliant. She's absolutely amazing to work with, because she wants to be there. And that's another thing, this whole boys and girls, who's the best, male drivers, female drivers.
Surely that can't feel like work for you when you spend a day with somebody that's just shares the same passion as you, wants to be in the car all day and just wants to improve.
I don't work for a living. I enjoy a paid hobby. I remember talking to a very, very good friend of mine. He's a very old personal friend of mine, nothing to do with driving, and he earned mega money in the city. And I just said to him one day, I'm just not sure I'll ever be able to earn that kind of money. I went, well, maybe not, but I'll never be able to get out of bed with your level of enthusiasm, will I? Well, yeah, good point. And that's why, when right at the beginning, why do I do what I do? Well, I just try and help people enjoy their driving more, because that's the reason they came to me, is because they want more from it, whatever description they put on that. They want to be quicker, or they want to be more confident, or they want to be less nervous. And that's actually probably, if I had to pick a group of people that is the most rewarding, it's those that are nervous of the public road. Or I've just moved into a new place, and the woman next door very kindly gave me a lift somewhere, because my car was getting serviced that day. And she said, no, I don't like driving. And she looked pretty competent, actually, to be fair. But through the conversation, it turns out that she's a bit nervous of driving. The risks of other people's poor behaviour is not great. And I did think to myself, okay, I'll be able to help you out with that. I mean, I'm not going to start touting for business. We live next door. We'll just pop out for an hour or two one evening. But to actually to make someone more confident, where they would suffer a journey to go to the shops or to go take the kids to school or something like that, to actually make them, dare I say it, maybe even enjoy it, but certainly not to be nervous of it anymore. Far more rewarding. I loved sitting with you guys, but if we never sat together, you're still going to enjoy your driving. Yes, I can help you do it better, but you'll still enjoy it. You won't be nervous on your way to work or way to your mate's house or way to the track. So yeah, from a sort of a human point of view, to actually make someone more confident, especially when they're driving their children around and all that sort of thing, to actually give them some skills. And actually what's quite interesting is most people who are nervous are actually pretty good, because they tend to be nervous of the right things, don't they? Whereas me, when I was aged 18, was I nervous? No. Was I near death on several occasions, but glibly unaware of it? Probably.
I think most people in that boat. I think that's it's quite normal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't nervous, but the people around me probably were.
Yeah.
I think the operative that I would describe, what I've got from you, Rob, is discipline, both on road and track. And like I say, we've been quite well. I've had the privilege of sitting with you for a good number of days now, and there will definitely be more of that coming forward. I'm sure the same will be with Joe as well on road and track. So thank you to you, thank you to Bernard as well, who was quite clearly the inspiration behind your entire career, which you were saying is 20 years strong now.
November 1999, I met him. I started as a training instructor on September the 6th, 1999, and I met him in the November.
How did you transition from the sort of the driving instructor to being the sort of performance guru, consultant, track expert, shall we call it, at the old experience centre now?
That's an interesting question. I actually went through a phase so how did I do it in practical terms? Bernard, yet again. Remember I mentioned about working for a firm with the Jaguars? Well, that was run by a guy called Rob Gravitt, former touring car champion. And Bernard used to coach all the want-to-be members of the P1 Car Club. If you remember, that was set up by Damon Hill and a guy called Michael Breen. I've never met Michael or Damon for that matter, but I just know that Bernard did all the training. And then the insurance firm needed something with a little bit more paperwork behind it, shall we say, because Bernard was very old school. He'd sit with you, but there was no sort of forms or sort of clarification that you'd performed this course, no certification, any of that stuff. So the work went to Rob, and Bernard rang Rob. So I went in for a meeting, and it was quite interesting. It still took me a lot longer than this to work out just how influential Bernard was. But I sat next to Rob, and he said, Bernard says you're worth looking at. I said, well, that's really generous of him. How do you know him? And he said, I don't. I've never met the man, but I know who he is. So Bernard's reputation was such that people that had never even met him would be willing to take you on simply because of his say-so. And that was exactly what happened at Porsche. It was in 2007. So the Porsche Experience Centre was conceived in 2006 and went live in 2008. And I went down to see Bernard down in Sussex for lunch. And I rocked up, I don't know, about 11 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And he opened the door, said, lovely to see you, lad. Come on in. And we sat down. He said, now, I know you've come for lunch, but I'm afraid you're not going to be able to stay for lunch because you've got a meeting at Porsche at 3 o'clock. Now, he and Porsche sort of parted company on slightly less than smooth terms, shall we say. And so, there was a little bit of disagreement when he parted company, but still his reputation was such that when he rang up the people that he'd sort of fallen out with, and he said, I've got a young guy you want to have a look at, they arranged a meeting, and quite happy took me on. And I was very, very green at that point. So that's practically how it happened. And then going deeper than that from an instructing point of view, I have to say I did think that the learner market maybe didn't give me as much experience as it actually had done. I thought I needed more track experience and I hadn't done enough of this or that. And there's an element of truth in that, of course. You gain more experience in certain disciplines. But if you can actually break a skill down to teach someone who's never actually done it before at all, then you take someone like you guys who are, experienced drivers and interested. If I can get a learner to do it for the first time, then I can take what you've been doing for years and get you to take stuff in at a more or at a deeper level. This idea of thinking about how you turn the wheel and the effect that it's having on the car, that sort of thing. And so I hadn't really appreciated that at first, but of course it was a massive benefit, because if you can't get the foundations right, well, you're never going to be able to build upon those. I mean, it's an old cliche, but it's true of anything. I mean, we started off, didn't we, about the conversation about the job title. So your job title, Lee, editor. Well, what's the difference, would you say, between an editor and an advanced editor? How would you describe that difference?
Well, I'd say it's a 20 grand in that at least if my employees are listening. But I get what you're saying there. It's about doing a job and some, isn't it then?
Yeah, it's just getting the basics right. To be an advanced anything, you've just got to be a bit more knowledgeable. And the knowledge I've got has either been through study or other people's guidance. I mean, that's the thing in this industry. I do meet instructors who seem to think that they were born to do this. Now, don't get me wrong. I think I have a natural aptitude, but if I claim that I didn't learn it from somewhere, I've just undermined my entire professional existence, haven't I? Because you've got to learn it from somewhere. We were all born with no language skills or driving ability.
Right, Rob, is there anyone that you would say that you're still learning from today?
Yes. I mean, Bernard. Yeah, Bernard won't really discuss. He doesn't really discuss driving anymore. He left that behind a long time ago. So there are people. So Ian Holton, Brian Saunders, Ben McLaughlin, a guy called Mark Birkinshaw. These are all Porsche guys. A guy called Colin Hode. He's truly amazing. I won't mention his company name. Probably no need. If you Google his name, you'll probably find his company name. He's excellent. I had a day with him in 2006. Probably, I would say he's a real contender for the best in the business at the moment. Certainly that I've met. I've not, well, I've not met everyone. But the biggest thing about that was me and two instructors went and had a half day with him, and it was his enthusiasm. This was something that Bernard banged on about for years, was my enthusiasm for the job. And you think, well, he's not enthusiastic about this. I mean, it's not working for a living. And then you go out and you meet loads of instructors in this higher end of the industry, and you realise, God, a lot of them just want to be racing and they do this because they have to, and they're not actually enthused. And so it was Colin's real passion for it. And clients, I learned from clients, how a client responds to stuff is always going to be subtly different from another client. And if you don't pay attention to that, then you're an idiot, frankly, as an instructor. Because that can help you with another client further down the line.
What about your insight at the old Porsche Centre? Is there anyone that that's potentially up and coming, that's maybe one to watch, that's coming up through the ranks, whether it's on the racing scene or the driving sort of instructor scene?
Well, I mean, the names that I started with there were Porsche guys that particularly impress. I mean, Charlie Eastwood, 2017 Carrera Cup champion, he started to work there for a little bit, but he didn't go through with his ADI. I think being a somewhat talented driver himself, he's maybe looking at staying with the driving route rather than instructing route. It's an interesting one, actually, because you don't sit with each other. So as for new, younger guys, I don't get to sit with them to know. As I said, Neil Ferber, I mean, he now lives in France, but he still instructs, and he'll still fly over to do some work. So he's relatively new to the instructing industry. He was a aero designer at Red Bull when Red Bull were cleaning up with Vettel behind the wheel. So he's incredibly bright, and he's looking at doing other things as well as instructing, coaching of other elements in life. So he's one that I spend a lot of time. I mean, he and I will chat, and we can chat for an hour or two on the phone about all sorts of things, just the way that we view life and stuff like that, which is interesting. And then Bruce Lee, as I said earlier, Bruce Lee is a massive inspiration. So the Porsche guys, they're all capable in their own way. As I said, just don't sit with many of them. The ones I've named are the ones that particularly strike me, but that's more on a human level. I've almost gone beyond. There's plenty of guys that can race really well, but they probably couldn't instruct for toffee. And then I consider myself a very good instructor because I try to be, but I will reach limitations behind the wheel that other guys will exceed, and I'm quite happy with that. The best drivers don't make the best instructors, and vice versa. It's
a really honest place. I think that's it's a great place. I think we've had an amazing insight as well. I think some of the stuff we've covered tonight has been quite in depth, and it's an insight into a different world, isn't it?
Well, that's what Bernard gave to me. So when back to that earliest question that you wanted to pose of why do I do what I do, it's because someone came along and completely changed how I look at it. Actually, that's probably the best thing. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create my own Peter Smith. So in 2012, I went to a Ferrari service centre in London. It's an HROing centre. I do work for HROing on behalf of a very good friend of mine, Ivan Thompson. Didn't mention him. He's someone that shares the same philosophies as me. Anyway, this chap, very smart, suited and booted, walks through the door, wanders over, and I said, "Oh, Peter?" He said, "Yes." "Peter, Rob?" "Yes, absolutely." I said, Have you done this before?" He's my morning client. I said, "Have you done this before?" He said, Yeah, I did this. Did 2 days of this when I joined Porsche with a guy called Bernard Aubrey. Do you know him? I thought, well, funny you should mention him. Yeah, I do know him, and told him a little bit. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, this is 2012. Bernard left Porsche in 02, 03. And this guy is waxing lyrical about these 2 days. He said, this guy completely revolutionised the way I view driving. He said, I now drive 100,000 miles a year, travelling down to Italy to pick up a Ferrari, bring it back to the UK. He said, and I love every single one of those miles, and it's all thanks to Bernard. And I said, when was this? He said, 1988. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, is to try and still have someone 24 years after they've sat with me talk about me like that.
It's creating a legacy, isn't it? And I think that's amazing. I think
it's unbelievable.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, it's unbelievable, yeah.
I'm just looking at the phone nervously, Rob, because I'm on 2% battery. So we're going to have to wrap it up. We've got 10 questions to ask you, which we ask everybody. It's one-word answers and the first thing that comes to your head, so long as it's clean.
Well, I can't make any promises, but I'll do my best.
All right, Rob. So, okay, question 1 of 10, Rob Colborne, is air or water?
Water.
Favourite Porsche model?
911.
Good man. Favourite Porsche colour?
I would have said Carmine Red, but Gentian Blue's just come out, and I'm torn.
Nice.
I'm torn.
Okay, yeah, fair play. Ultimate Porsche icon then. This is person, really.
Walter Roll.
Yes. Favourite track?
Do you want it? Sorry, just to give you the quote as to why. Good drivers have flyers on the side windows.
Very good. We'll let you have that. That's absolutely awesome. And a very apt decision for you as well. But anyway, I digress. Number 5, Rob. Favourite Porsche, or favourite track, sorry.
Favourite track? Goodwood.
To foosh or not to foosh in reference to the wheels?
Yes.
Yeah, you're a fan.
Not only, but yes.
Yeah, okay. Stock or hot rod when it comes to your Porsche?
Stock's fine with me.
Yeah. Narrow body or wide body?
Narrow body.
Cars and coffee or track day?
Track day.
Yes. And is the Cayman a real Porsche?
Absolutely. The cheek of it.
I know, to be honest with you, we put that question in for a laugh. It sort of stuck, but the longer we keep it, the more I just think that one's got to go, to be honest. But yeah, never mind. We're probably pissing off half our listeners with that one, but never mind.
Well, everybody knows that from the front bumper to the back of your seat, they're both the same anyway.
Yeah, give or take. Rob Colborne, it's been an absolute pleasure. People can find you on the website. Is it robertcolborne.co.uk?
It certainly is, yeah.
Yes.
Keep it simple. I can remember that one, you see.
Yeah, well, hopefully everybody at home will do too. So yes, go and check that out. And like I say, get in contact with Rob if you feel your driving could benefit from a little bit of performance tuition. Rob, thanks very much, my man.
Absolute pleasure. Always good to speak to you, Lee.
Nice one. Cheers, mate. See you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.